Meanwhile, of course, what's been dominating the news, the focus has been on Parliament tomorrow as MPs will gather in a special sitting to debate findings of the Phala Phala report. The ANC NEC already resolving that its caucus in Parliament will not support a motion of no confidence against President Cyril Ramaphosa and that they will vote against the adoption of the damning report. Let's now hear from the minority parties and how they will vote on this topic. I'm joined by Jama-Ah leader Ganief Hendricks, as well as the secretary of the GOOD Party Brett Herron and leader of the African Christian Democratic Party, Reverend Kenneth. Gentlemen, good evening. Good to have you and thank you very much for your time. Brett, let's begin with you. I've been reading the papers of the president now that have been filed in the Constitutional Court. He seems to suggest that the processes followed by the panel could probably be proven to be invalid, which would mean this is not a valid report of the panel if that is successful in the Constitutional Court, which essentially means this second step that you want to take as Parliament might also be invalid.
Yes, Thabo. I mean, I'm also busy reading the President's review application at the moment. I haven't finished. But even before receiving the papers, we also had some concerns around some of the findings that the panel made and whether those findings are competent. But at the end of the day, the panel's report makes findings and makes recommendations, and they stand for as long or until they are reviewed and set aside if that does indeed happen based on the President's application.
Rev, do you think you are putting the horse or cart before the horse here in terms of going to the second part of this Section 89 process, having already now being very clear that the President is taking this report on review?
Thabo, we are fulfilling our constitutional duties. As you know that the Constitutional Court on a few occasions challenged and reprimanded Parliament for not doing oversight over the executive. Now, what the President is doing is not only regrettable, but I think it is wrong. Because one of the things that we hate that is included in his application is that Parliament should be halted from doing anything that would remove him from his position. He should not be investigated. That is what we have heard. For him to suggest that the Constitutional Court that has reprimanded Parliament for not doing his duty can now say to Parliament, don't continue with your investigation of the President or with your attempts to impeach him. I think that is wrong, what he has done, and the ACDP that accepts and fully accepts what the report, Section 89 report says, is unhappy with the President's move. If he just wanted a review, was something different. But for him to go to an extent of wanting the Constitutional Court to hold the proceedings of Parliament to save his skin and his position, it is totally unacceptable.
Yeah. You're not concerned that the same court, as you put it, that said Parliament laxed in its, I'm using paraphrase here, in its responsibility of oversight, could probably find that the process taken by the National Assembly going ahead with this vote to be declared unlawful?
That cannot be the case, because everybody in South Africa who knows that there were foreign currency, $4 million is what we are told, on the property of the President, want to know how did that money get there? So whoever, including Parliament, that has a committee, or including Parliament that puts a committee together to investigate, would be right to get answers to the public, because the President has been asked on a number of occasions, how did that money end there? Where does that money come from? He's dodging, ducking, and diving, does not want to give answers.
Yeah.
And we must get answers. We are demanding answers. And the judges at the Constitutional Court also want to know, how did that money get on that farm? And why did the president not tell the police or open a case of theft on his property? And these are all questions that South Africans have in their minds, and they must be answered. And there is no way that the Constitutional Court can say, let the people of South Africa continue asking questions without any answers. Because we want answers, and the Constitutional Court that we highly respect will do its job and will say to the president, you are out of order. The investigations must go on because South Africans want the truth.
I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Ganief, let's bring in here. What's the view of Jama-Ah? Did the panel misconceive its mandate? An organ of the National Assembly, did it fail to fulfill its obligation as the president is stating in his papers?
Thank you very much. The findings of the panel is alarming, but it is alarming based on submissions made by 4 political parties. And the submissions they have made do not have what we call law of evidence muster. In other words, it's not like an affidavit and the corroborating evidence and cross-examination and re-examination. So it is when the speaker called for this panel, we felt that it is wasteful expenditure, it's a waste of time, but the rules of parliament required a panel to be established. So all the panel had in front of it were the comments, untested comments, do not have any legal muster, and they had to work with that. And they also asked the president to respond to it, and the president responded to it in his way. So what the panel had in front of it, I think that the findings that they made were in order. And I think that the president is making a fool of himself to go to the Constitutional Court and to stop tomorrow's meeting. I know that there are 10 political parties, there were 11, that have now a game plan. They are acting as branches of the ANC. The elective conference is only taking place next week, and they are already trying to act as branches of the ANC to decide for the ANC who their next president should be. Because the term of office expired, and to make a recommendation to Parliament. So I'm very surprised, that political parties want to be branch of the ANC. Jama-Ah is not a branch of the ANC. So going forward, we feel that the report must be read, that there must be a debate, and we'll have to see what happens. And we know that the ANC has the numbers, and that's why at the beginning I felt that if the ANC uses numbers, it's going to be a waste of time, number one, to call for a committee to consider or recommend an impeachment. That committee will take a month or two to make a decision. And when the committee is eventually established, it will take another year to make a decision.
Why do you think it will be a waste of time? Sorry, Ganief. Why do you think it will be a waste of time when there have already been MPs who have publicly said President Ramaphosa must step down? They are likely going to support that motion of no confidence.
Look, that is their right, but there is a elective conference in a week's time, just over a week. ANC members are not going to put their future at stake. They know that they have to tread carefully because 2/3 of the branches voted for Cyril Ramaphosa as the new president. They're not going to take things lightly. They will most probably prevail at the conference. So they will be very, very careful not to jeopardize their political future. So I don't think any ANC member will vote in favor of the report. They may abstain because if there's a motion and it's a DA motion, many ANC members won't vote for a DA motion like they didn't vote for the motion with regard to the Committee of Inquiry for the Public Protector. So those are some of the dynamics at play. But I'm just disappointed that 10 opposition parties now want to consider themselves as branches of the ANC, because it's the branches of the ANC that decide who's the next president now that his term of office has expired. So I can't see why Parliament and the Speaker can't wait a week, see what the outcome is, and if President Ramaphosa is re-elected, then certainly we can proceed along the line that the opposition parties, the 10 opposition parties, there were 11, have decided to go forward. Yeah. But for now, the nation is seeing that they are acting as if they are branches of the ANC.
So, sorry, Ganief, clear that for me once again. You're saying there were 11, now there are 10. Why?
I think one of them, Mr. Bloom, indicated that,
I see, right.
Withdraw from, the program that the 10 political parties have decided on tomorrow. Maybe, I don't know what, to disrupt the proceedings. I don't know what the game plan is tomorrow.
Right. All right, clear. Brett, does this, in a way, I suppose, because it's the first time that Parliament has got to deal with this Section 89 process in such a fashion, having adopted the rules of how a president would be removed from office. It is a helpful thing, for example, in what the president is arguing, determining what is the standard for sufficient evidence, arguing that information from political parties is information, but, for example, the panel needs to be able to interrogate that information and establish what sufficient evidence really means.
Well, I think you're correct, Howell, that sufficient evidence is different to prima facie evidence. And it is important, I think, for the precedent to be set for future processes as to what sufficient evidence means and how you establish it. So the President's application with regards to the sufficient evidence part, I think, is an important addition to our jurisprudence. And jurisprudence is something that develops over time through court decisions. And so what comes out of this application will certainly enrich our jurisprudence and the functioning of Parliament and the rules and how the Constitution is applied in the future. So it is an important test, and I think it's right that it is tested. But I do want to, if I may, just quickly, unless my colleagues have read something that I haven't read, there's no attempt by the President to stop tomorrow's debate. The application with regards to parliamentary procedures basically says that if the review is successful and the panel report is set aside, then as a consequence of that, any steps taken by Parliament would also be unlawful and should be set aside. So what the application is really saying is that if the review is successful and Parliament proceeds with a Section 89 impeachment process, that process would then be unlawful because it is commenced based on an unlawful and set-aside report.
That's my understanding as well, but Rev, maybe you're understanding it differently. We'll come to you and give you an opportunity to respond to that. What are your thoughts? Is the motion going to be a success or, again, as Jama-Ah puts it, possibly a process where they'll debate, but certainly ANC MPs will vote along party lines and therefore would prove the process quite futile? What are your thoughts? 072-110-5584. We continue in a moment. Back live with you tonight and in focus, and thanks for staying on. Ganief Hendricks of Jama-Ah still with us, Secretary General of the GOOD Party Brett Herron, and leader of the African Christian Democratic Party, Reverend Kenneth Meshoe, still with us tonight. And of course, taking your thoughts on the conversation on 072-110-5584 to the process that is meant to take place tomorrow in Parliament, voting for the adoption of the Section 89 panel report. The President has already taken this report on review. The ANC's NEC has decided to instruct its MPs in Parliament to vote against the adoption of the Section 89 panel report. Rev, the President is arguing in his papers that the panel conducts an inquiry, right? It is fulfilling the constitutional obligation of Parliament provided for in Section 55, subsection 2 and Section 89 of the Constitution. If it conducts its affairs unlawfully and invalidly, it is failing to give effect to the constitutional obligation imposed on Parliament, and therefore any other steps that would be taken thereafter would be unlawful. Not that the steps would be blocked, I suppose, from taking place.
Tomorrow, members of Parliament have to debate the report. From what Erin, your news reporter, said, is that the President Cyril Ramaphosa asked the Concord to halt further steps on his possible removal. All right? He asked Concord to halt further steps on his possible removal. He knows that what he has done is definitely giving credence and giving room for those who are arguing that he has seriously violated the Constitution, and he has also seriously involved in misconduct, because you cannot know that a criminal activity is taking place or has taken place, that you should be reporting to the police. You don't report. That is a crime on its own, and that is not spoken a lot about. And we are saying the Speaker was right to say a panel must investigate whether there was, he did not, said whether there was prima facie case. Okay, prima facie. That's what the Speaker requested. Prima facie case. And that's exactly what the panel has done. That is why the ACDP supports the work of the panel. Some people are questioning the word may. Their investigation was not conclusive. Okay, they just had to agree or disagree whether there was any prima facie case.
So what are you saying? Sorry, Rev. What are you saying to what Jama-Ah is saying, that, for example, the laws of evidence were not applied in that determination of prima facie? In other words, the standard of prima facie is not the standard of sufficient evidence and didn't follow, for example, what would be admissible as evidence. And if evidence is gathered illegally, it's something that would not be admissible in the processes of the court. All those things, President arguing that they were not taken into consideration in reaching that conclusion that there's prima facie.
I do not agree. You know, it's like my colleagues wanted sufficient evidence, and that was not their mandate. They were not asked to look for sufficient evidence. If they were asked to come back with sufficient evidence, they would have called witnesses. They would have gone far beyond what they were given. That is why they said in the report, from the facts before them, they did not go beyond the facts. Okay, from what they were specifically asked to do, the information before them, they had to check whether there was prima facie evidence, and I think they did that very well.
So as Parliament, you are not interested to know the validity and the admissibility of the evidence, how it was obtained. You just look at the information and say, well, this is the information, and therefore there's a prima facie case, and we go ahead on that. Is that the standard that we want to set?
No, that's not what we are saying. We are saying if you want serious investigation to take place, tell the investigators to not leave any stone unturned. Tell them. But when you say, indeed, the president has agreed that there was foreign currency on his farm, what evidence else do you need to say whether it was there or not? Because he has agreed that there was money on his farm. And then he asked a wrong person, the head of his security, to investigate, which he knew as a president. It was not his mandate. All right? So if people want all information about this issue, then the panel should be given that responsibility. Investigate thoroughly. Don't leave any stone unturned, and get witnesses so that you can get all the facts. So the panel, I submit, was not told to bring substantive evidence, but only prima facie evidence.
All right. Ganief, do you think a parliamentary process would be much more effective than all the other instruments, security or justice, legal instrument, whatever, that are currently looking at this process? So you've got the public protector, you've got the Hawks, you've got the SARS, you've got the Reserve Bank, all investigating this matter. Do you think a parliamentary process, having its own committee look into this, would do a better job?
I think that we have to understand that in 2019, the ANC won the elections, and that the branches put in place the NEC and the cabinet, and also recommended to Parliament who the president of our country should be. So it is the branches of the ANC that should play a very prominent role here. And once they've taken all their decisions, in other words, elected a new president and recommended that person to be the president of the country, we then have to do our oversight and hold the president to account. So if it's a president other than Cyril Ramaphosa, then there's nothing for us to do. However, if it is Cyril Ramaphosa that is returned as the president, and it looks in terms of the nominations of the branches, and they're not going to change their mind. There's no time to change their mind. They will most probably recommend that he be the president of the ANC and ask Parliament to elect him as president of the country. When that happens, then it is the right time for Parliament to do their proper oversight, hold that president to account. But to do it now will just create a lot of problems for the country. You must understand that if the president resigns, then his cabinet will follow. They'll have to resign as well. In the cabinet, we have security forces. We have people looking after the finances of the country. We have so many other structures in the presidency. So a new president will put his men in place. And he may even use this opportunity to be mischievous and to try and be elected as the president at the elective conference. So political parties, the 10 political parties, must not act as branches of the ANC. They must let the ANC branches, who have the power, because the country gave them a mandate to elect, to have a new president in Parliament. Once that is done in 10 days' time, then we can act. I don't think we should rush this matter and throw the country into turmoil. That is anti-revolutionary.
Thabo, can I come in there?
Yes, you can.
I need to correct my colleague. When former President Thabo Mbeki was removed from office, government did not collapse. His deputy took over. When former President Jacob Zuma was removed from office, government again did not collapse.
I have to ask permission to intervene. Remember, there was no ANC elective conference 9 days after they were removed. Here there is an ANC elective conference in 9 days' time. There was no ANC elective conference in 9 days' time when they were removed.
The time of the ANC conference is irrelevant. The fact is that if there is a serious misconduct, the head of state can be removed. That is what the Constitution of South Africa says.
Sorry guys, I'm going to come and bring in Brett here. Hold on. Hold on, and we shouldn't divert and talk about the ANC's elective conference, but indeed, that is the question that needs to be answered on what serious misconduct is. And if the threshold requirement that we put, Brett, on the determining a charge of serious misconduct is prima facie a case, is that the standard that we want to set?
Well, I don't really want to keep disagreeing with my colleagues, but it's not correct that the mandate of the panel was to find only prima facie evidence. Section 129G of the Rules of Parliament specifically sets out that the panel is to establish sufficient evidence, which we will see whether the panel's interpretation of that is correct. The panel interprets sufficient to mean the same as prima facie or prima facie evidence. Whereas the President, and I think I agree with the President, sets sufficient evidence as a higher level of evidence. So with respect, the Reverend is incorrect. The panel's role was to find sufficient evidence, not prima facie evidence. And the definition of serious misconduct or serious breach of the Constitution or the law includes bad faith. And so, you know, there may well have been a breach of the law, or there may well have been misconduct, but the panel also had to find that that was committed in bad faith. And the panel's report barely deals with bad faith, or doesn't deal with it sufficiently in my view, which doesn't mean that I think that the panel's report is entirely without value, but it does give the President the space and perhaps our law the space to test what serious means and what sufficient evidence means.
Rev, let's wrap up with you then. Finally, your thoughts on that question of bad faith. The President arguing, for example, that he did not act in bad faith and the panel could not found evidence that proves he acted in bad faith.
Thabo, I cannot agree with you if you or anybody suggests that when the President refused to answer questions, when the President allowed millions of dollars of foreign currency on his farm, that's not acting in bad faith. When he knows that if there is a crime that is committed, it must be reported to specific structures, to the Hawks, or go to the nearest police station, and he does not do that, he's acting in bad faith because he knows what should be done, but he's not doing what needs to be done. So he definitely, I believe, he has acted in bad faith. He has the right to say he did not, but I think and I believe he acted in bad faith.
Reverend Kenneth, appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much for coming on. Ganief Hendricks and Brett Herron, thank you very much. Let's look at what you're saying tonight on Twitter, 072-110-5584. I beg your pardon, on WhatsApp. Anonymous saying, the ANC will never learn. They closed ranks and defended Zuma. They are doing the same thing by defending Ramaphosa. They can continue with their corrupt administration. We will vote them out in 2024. Neville in Rivoli saying, good evening, everyone. The minority parties should vote the ANC out, call fresh elections as soon as possible. Appreciate your engagement and thank you very much for coming on and to our panel tonight.